One of the most iconic all-American brands is in serious trouble. Over the past decade, Ford stock has plunged 35%, while the S&P 500 skyrocketed by 186%. Even Wall Street veteran and NBC host Jim Cramer, never one to hold back, put it bluntly. Ford's been a disappointment. The stock has been awful, and 2025 isn't looking any better. Ford projects a $2 billion drop in pre-tax earnings compared to the previous year, sending its stock price into a tailspin and leaving investors in full-blown panic mode. So, what's happening to one of America's most legendary names? The auto giant that's been around since 1903, pioneered the assembly line, and revolutionized modern car manufacturing. Why are things going so badly? Let's follow someone buying and testing a Ford car to see where things went wrong. You've just escaped the city and you settle into a quiet mountain town ready to embrace your newfound freedom. And what better way to complete the picture than with a big, sturdy all-American car? Luckily, you've already spotted a few Ford models online that you love, and there's a dealership just around the corner. You step into the dealership, scanning the showroom, eager to check out the models you saw. As you wait for assistance, a salesman approaches with a friendly smile and asks, "How can I help you today?" Since Ford and Lincoln are part of the same company, you ask, "Do you have any Lincoln Nautilus SUVs in stock?" The salesman's smile fades. He nervously adjusts his collar, lowers his voice, and says, The ones we had been recalled. They're being repaired." You're a little disappointed, but that's okay. There's still a couple of models that you'd like to test drive. How about the Ford Escape? It's a hybrid electric after all. Maybe you could help the environment with your new purchase. The salesman starts to sweat. The few of those we had in stock were recalled as well, so they're also in the shop. The Ford Flex? The salesman looks down at the floor and whispers, "Recall." Are there any cars available at this dealership at all? And what's with all the recalls? Why does it seem like Ford can't make a decent car anymore without having to pull it back for repairs? Ford has unfortunately become a leader in the U.S. auto industry in recalls. The company has been drowning in bad press due to mechanical failures and other issues, forcing massive recalls that are hitting both its bottom line and, more importantly, the safety of its customers. According to the National Highway Traffic Safety Administration, NHTSA, between late December 2024 and early January 2025, Ford issued recalls for nearly 400,000 vehicles, and it wasn't for minor problems either. The company recalled 20,000 hybrid electric Ford Escapes as well as 4,000 Lincoln Corsairs because of problems with the car's high-voltage batteries. The problem being that the batteries might short-circuit. In addition, Ford recalled 48,000 2024 and 2025 Lincoln Nautilus SUVs over concerns that the automatic window reverse system, which is supposed to prevent windows from closing on a person's arm or other obstructions, may not function properly. In other news, more than 30,300 Ford Flexes, 12,000 older Ford Fiestas, and 800 Lincoln MKTs due to a faulty analog rear-view camera, which had the habit of either distorting the image or going completely blank. A serious issue for drivers who actually want to see what's behind them. The biggest recall was almost 295,000 diesel pickups and Ford commercial vehicles. The company was afraid that biodiesel deposits could make the fuel pump fail, causing a crash. The most troubling of all, by far, involves over 66,200 2021 Ford Expeditions and Lincoln Navigator SUVs, all due to mysterious under-hood engine fires. Owners were instructed to park the cars outside, far away from anything that didn't want to die a fiery death, and then wait until the recall is performed. To put 400,000 recalls into perspective, Ford manufactured 1.8 million cars in the U.S. in 2023 and sold 4.5 million vehicles worldwide in 2024. Recalling nearly 10% of an entire year's sales is not a good look, and it's even worse for Ford's profits. Recalls have driven up warranty costs as failing vehicles require major repairs, expenses that Ford is forced to cover. This not only cuts into the profits, but also erodes consumer trust in the brand. Freedom Capital Markets analyst Mike Ward wrote, "Warranty has been a growing issue at Ford over the last 5 years and has escalated over the past year. Between 2011 and 2019, warranty averaged 1.6% of revenue, but since the beginning of 2022, accruals have averaged 2.9% and exceeded 4% in the second quarter. And warranty costs keep spiraling out of control. In Q2 of 2024 alone, they spiked by $800 million, pushing total costs to $1.5 to $2 billion, sending investors into a panic." CFO John Lawler tried to calm shareholders, calling it a one-time jump due to issues with the cars. But all the subsequent recalls haven't done much to reassure people that Ford has fixed its quality problems. These high warranty costs are part of the reason that Ford's operating profits are down 26% from the previous year. Due to the jump, Ford had to adjust its reported earnings to 47 cents per share, a huge step down from the 68 cents per share previous Bloomberg estimate. But we'll get to the specifics about Ford stocks soon because all is not well in the market. Back at the Ford dealership, you're sitting near reception waiting as your sales rep searches for a vehicle, any vehicle, that's actually available for sale and not currently under recall. With all the stress at the dealership today, you decide to take out your phone and check Ford's stock prices. Maybe it's time you sell some shares. You Google the current stock price, and a ton of articles pop up that do absolutely nothing to reassure you. Ford falls after warnings of steep profit decline this year, writes Bloomberg. Investopedia warns Ford stock falls after Jefferies analyst downgrade. From $11.95 per share in February of 2024, Ford stock has fallen to $9.47 at the end of February 2025. The bad outlook for Ford stocks is reflective of a lot of problems, some of which can't fully be blamed on Ford. The pandemic caused supply chain issues that hit every industry around the world, particularly rattling the car industry with semiconductor and other shortages. The uncertainty around potential tariffs on Canada and Mexico also concern the car industry. As Ford CEO Jim Farley said on February 11, 2025, so far what we're seeing is a lot of cost and a lot of chaos. But while General Motors and other car companies have also seen their shares take a hit since talk of tariffs started, Ford stocks have been declining long before that. And part of the problem is an issue Ford has been dealing with for decades: a lack of transparency with their investors and customers. But while a lot of companies like Toyota have been transparent about their supply chain struggles, Ford has taken a different approach. According to Sam Fiorani, Vice President for Global Vehicle Forecasting at Auto Forecasting, Ford has quietly halted factories and absorbed the financial hit instead of preparing Wall Street. As Fiorani puts it, getting in front of the problem, as many of its competitors have done, would have helped. CEO Farley did eventually admit that Ford left about $2 billion profit on the table due to cost, and especially to continued supply chain issues. He added, "To say I'm frustrated is an understatement because the year could have been so much more for us at Ford." But for many on Wall Street, the CEO's admission was too little too late, and Ford stocks continued to decline. Unfortunately, a lack of forwardness about potential problems is nothing new for Ford, and it has somewhat damaged the company's reputation. We mentioned some of the manufacturer's most recent recalls earlier, but they're nothing compared to some of Ford's most visible, historic mistakes. As anyone who was around in the 70s can tell you, the Ford Pinto was such a black eye for Ford that for decades it became a punchline synonymous with a complete disaster of a car. Customers, those who survived, nicknamed it the barbecue that seats four, because in a lot of accidents the gas tank, thanks to its positioning, would rupture and explode. And we're not talking about high-speed highway collisions. Even relatively minor crashes could convert the Pinto into a fireball, which was a real problem for the people inside of it. All in all, 9,000 people lost their lives as a result of this manufacturing defect. But what's even worse is that Ford already knew about it before putting the cars on the market. Crash tests made the issue painfully clear to Ford executives, but instead of fixing the problem, they did the math, and they decided that paying wrongful death lawsuits would cost less than a full-scale fix before selling the cars. So off to the dealerships they went. The cars were sold, horrific accidents followed, and Ford's reckless disregard for its customers was exposed. In the end, the company didn't just face lawsuits, it completely lost the public's trust. You might be thinking, but that was ages ago. The Brady Bunch was still on the air, hippies were still around, and it's been years since then. Surely Ford has learned its lesson. Well, not so much, as in the late 1990s, Ford had yet another very public scandal regarding its Ford Explorer models, specifically that the slightest nudge would roll them over. Ford blamed Firestone, the company it was partnered with for tire production. Firestone blamed Ford, as its engineers had brought up the problem before the Explorer was brought to market, and both companies got dragged in the press. Even though Firestone ended up taking most of the blame, people still didn't completely forget Ford's role in all this, dinging the company's reputation. As you sit in the dealership chair, scrolling through horror stories about the Pinto, the Explorer, and other Ford disasters, your sense of excitement is quickly fading. Just then, the sales rep returns, forcing a smile. "Good news," he says. "I found a few models I think you'll like. Want to take a walk around the showroom?" You go to check them out, and you see gas-powered truck after gas-powered truck. You really were hoping for at least a few electric vehicle options. So you ask your sales rep to show you any electric cars he has, and he brings you to 3 cars hidden in the far corner of the dealership. It seems like every other automaker is rolling out new EV models, so what is Ford doing? Well, what it's not doing is keeping up with the competition, especially General Motors. In 2024, GM expanded its EV lineup, rolling out several new Chevy and Cadillac electric models, further cementing its lead in the US EV market. In contrast, Ford only has 3 battery electric vehicles for sale: the Ford Mustang Mach-E SUV, the Ford F-150 Lightning, and the Ford E-Transit van. Sales of the Lightning have been slumping, as customers see it as becoming dated. Around 1,900 cars were sold for that model in January of 2025, a 15.5% decrease from almost 2,200 models in January of 2024. The Mach-E is doing much better, with over 3,500 cars sold in January 2025, a 172% increase from just under 1,300 in January 2024. But the automaker's electric vehicle business is still sluggish overall, so much so that Ford canceled plans for a 3-row electric SUV. On the other hand, keeping only limited EV offerings won't do much to help sales, as other car companies, particularly GM, have realized. Perhaps that's why the company's EV arm is not only struggling but failing badly. In 2024, Ford's electric vehicle and software business lost $5.1 billion. The previous year, it reported losses of $4.7 billion. That's one of the major reasons the company's profitability has stagnated and now is actually declining. Not only is it being outcompeted by other general car manufacturers, but also specialty EV companies like Tesla as well as EV companies abroad. The Chinese EV market is creating serious trouble for Ford. With heavy government subsidies, China's EV industry is driving prices down, making it harder for foreign automakers to compete. Yet, other U.S. car companies seem to be handling the pressure much better. Tesla remains the top American EV producer, and according to Morningstar auto analyst David Weiston, GM is in a far stronger position than Ford, largely because it offers a wider, more diverse EV lineup that appeals to a broader range of customers. As Weiston said, "I've long thought GM was in a better position on EVs because they spent more time developing things from scratch with dedicated EV platforms and moved faster on battery plant partnership. Political developments in the U.S. concerning electric vehicle tax credits are unlikely to help Ford's bottom line. The U.S. administration has put forth the idea of repealing the $7,500 tax credit for electric vehicle purchases. If that repeal goes through, industry analysts say that it's likely to have a depressant effect on the market for electric vehicles in general. As it stands now, Ford projects that its electric vehicle business will lose $5.5 billion in 2025, $400 million more than it lost in 2024. Well, you might as well give up on the electric car dream, you think. As you continue walking around the floor, you start to realize there's a lot of models, despite all the recalls resulting in cars held up at the shop. You look out at the parking lot and you see row after row of brand new Fords waiting for someone to come along and get them. You overhear 2 other sales reps talking about how some of the cars on the lot have been there for months. They don't even know what to do to sell them. Perhaps it shouldn't surprise you then after everything you've seen so far, but you wonder, why are there so many cars at the dealership? Why does Ford have such a huge inventory? And why is no one buying them? This brings us to another issue with Ford, and one that unfortunately also affects its stock price and financial status. Because in December of 2024, Jefferies analysts downgraded their rating of Ford stocks from hold to underperform. One of the biggest reasons for the downgrade was Ford's need to destock swollen inventory. Though other factors played a role, analysts cited concerns ranging from inventory overhang to looming strategic decisions on European presence and a widening gap between warranty provisions and related cash outflows. Inventory issues seem to be the biggest concern for most. As well, it should be, because the inventory backlog at Ford within the U.S. has reached 96 days. That means it takes Ford an average of 96 days to sell the vehicles it has on hand. According to Car Edge, if the car market is balanced, the inventory overhang should stand at around 60 days. That means if a car dealership has received no new cars, it would sell everything on its lot within 2 months. But that is far from what's happening with Ford. The company's inventory overhang has been a problem since 2023, and even its most iconic models aren't flying off the lots like they used to. The F-Series has an overhang of 117 days, while the Ford Mustang Mach-E has a 138-day inventory, depending on where in the country you are. Ford's premium brand, Lincoln, is faring even worse, with an average 146-day supply of cars sitting at dealerships around the U.S. The model that has been hit the worst by backlogs is the Aviator, which in 2023 had a 420-day supply. Barclays downgraded Ford's rating for similar reasons, pointing out that inventory backlog isn't just annoying, it is costly. Having to hold the cars for a longer period of time, and the use of markdowns just to get the cars sold, increases costs and cuts into profits. The exact reasons behind Ford's inventory issues aren't entirely clear, especially since sales remain steady despite declining profits, which are more tied to overhead costs than a drop in demand. To reduce the backlog, Barclays suggests that Ford needs to improve its forecasting, better understand customer demand, and tighten up its production planning and supply chain management. While looking out at the rows of gleaming new Ford cars, well, some are actually a bit dusty by now. You spot one you like, you ask the sales rep if he can show you the model, so you both walk outside. And you're starting to feel optimistic. Things couldn't get worse, could they? At least you're not buying a Ford in India back in 2021. Indian Ford customers would slide into the driver's seat, on the right side of course since it's India, and settle in. The key would turn, the engine would roar to life, and then they'd head out for a test drive. As they approached the road, they would go to signal a right turn, or at least they would try to. They'd flip the switch on the right side of the steering column, and instead of flashing indicators, the windshield wipers would start going. After fumbling around, they would find the signal switch on the left side. Apparently, Ford didn't bother adapting its cars for Indian roads, driving styles, or customer expectations, and this tone-deaf approach to international markets has caused major problems for the U.S. automaker. The example quoted above mirrors one Indian driver's experience testing out a Ford, and it's hardly the only frustration Indian drivers encountered while driving Ford cars. One industry expert says some of the Ford India's car models the owner drive had to get out, go around the vehicle, open the left side door to unlock the trunk. Not to mention, in a market that prioritizes smaller, fuel-efficient cars, where mileage is king, Ford completely miscalculated. Instead of adapting, it brought its usual lineup of oversized SUVs and sedans, proudly boasting about power and performance, features that Indian consumers simply don't care about. For the average Indian citizen, disposable income is limited, and the focus is on fuel efficiency, not horsepower. They need cars that are affordable to run and small enough to navigate the crowded, chaotic streets of cities like Mumbai and New Delhi. Ford misread the Indian market badly. As some local industry experts said, their initial attitude toward the Indian market was something like this: "You ate the pizza and burger that were launched, so drive the model we offer." But the pizza and burger companies Indianized their products, while the American car makers didn't do that, referring to McDonald's adjusting its offerings toward chicken and other dishes in India, as many people don't eat beef. Eventually, things got so bad in 2021, Ford pulled out of India completely. And it would be far from the first mistake Ford would make abroad, mistakes that would cost it massive investments. The company invested $11.6 billion, or 61 billion reals, into creating car production facilities in Brazil. It eventually accepted its losses and pulled out of the Brazilian market. In Europe, Ford just made the decision to fire 4,000 employees, which amount to 14% of its workforce in Europe, as the EV market slumps industry-wide on the continent. All of these poorly thought-out investment decisions and marketing efforts around the globe have contributed to Ford's struggle. However, all is not lost for Ford, which has survived for over 120 years so far. After all, even though it isn't doing as well as it would like in certain measures, it still has recorded a $10.2 billion adjusted operating profit in 2024. In addition, it remained the leader of U.S. car sales in 2024, just over 2 million vehicles sold within the country. That being said, Ford still has a long road ahead. If it wants to turn things around, it needs to fix major issues, not just to boost profits, but to improve its ratings from analysts, and most importantly, rebuild trust with its customers. What do you think is the real reason behind Ford's struggles? Is it the endless recalls, the EV missteps, or something else entirely? Let us know your thoughts in the comments below. Now go check out the real reason Starbucks is failing, or click on this video instead.